A single ancient text describes a weapon charged with all the power of the universe. This is not from a modern novel, but from a sacred Indian epic written thousands of years ago. Stories of impossible technology echo from crumbling manuscripts and sacred scriptures all around our world. By the end of this journey, you will have a completely new framework for understanding humanity's deepest past. We are about to uncover 25 ancient accounts of flying machines and cosmic wars, from detailed aeronautical manuals to visions of fiery chariots in the sky. What were our ancestors really trying to tell us? And what does it mean if these stories are more than just myth? The answers challenge everything we think we know about history. Are we ready to consider that our past might be far stranger than our history books admit? The priest's struggle is our first clue. His world had no concept of aerodynamics or advanced propulsion, only chariots, ships, and the sun's fiery disk. So when something immense and deafening tore through the heavens, what else could he call it but a chariot of fire? This is the fundamental puzzle we face. We are not reading ancient science fiction. We are deciphering what may be the best possible descriptions of incomprehensible events, recorded in the only language available. These accounts appear in texts that were the bedrock of entire civilizations. They were scripture, law, and history, preserved with immense care across generations. The fact that a scholar in India, a scribe in Mesopotamia, and a storyteller in the Americas could all independently record tales of luminous vehicles in the sky and devastating celestial conflicts points toward something extraordinary. It suggests a shared memory, a story so profound it echoed across the globe, dressed in the cultural garments of each people who told it. When we shift our perspective to view these writings not as invented allegory but as earnest, if confused, historical testimony, the entire landscape of the ancient world begins to change. The mystery deepens not from a single account but from a chorus of them, all singing a similar, haunting song about a time when the sky was not empty and the powers that shaped the world were anything but silent. The most startling aspect of these Indian texts is their sheer technical specificity. They are not poetic verses praising the glory of the gods. They are, by all appearances, manuals. The sage Maharshi Bhardwaj's Vimana Shastras categorize these craft with precise terminology, differentiating types by their purpose and design. There is the Rukma Vimana, said to have a conical shape and a golden exterior. There is the Sundara Vimana, described as particularly beautiful and streamlined. The texts delve into materials, speaking of light metals and alloys, some of which scholars suggest could be an early reference to aluminum or a sophisticated composite. But the propulsion described is where the mystery truly ignites. The writings mention systems involving mercury and rotating engines, a concept so advanced it would not be out of place in a discussion of modern aerospace engineering. One type, the Shakuna Vimana, is explicitly said to be patterned after a bird, its design harnessing principles of lift and thermodynamics. This is not a vague legend of a chariot pulled by winged horses. This is aeronautics. The language used is that of function and operation, detailing how to steer, how to ascend, and even how to protect the craft from hazards. This presents us with a profound and unsettling question. Was Maharshi Bhardwaj a visionary theorist, dreaming of flight millennia before the Wright brothers? Or was he a chronicler, meticulously documenting a technology that was already real, a science that was then lost to the long march of centuries? The Vimana Shastras stand as a monumental anomaly, a detailed blueprint for the impossible, waiting patiently in ancient Sanskrit for a world that could finally begin to understand its instructions. And as this blueprint was being composed in the East, an entirely different civilization to the West was recording its own encounters with objects that ruled the sky. The transition from a Sanskrit aeronautics manual to a biblical prophet's vision may seem vast, yet the core mystery remains eerily consistent. Centuries after the Vimana Shastras were composed and thousands of miles to the west, a man named Ezekiel stood by the Kebra River in ancient Babylon. What he witnessed and meticulously recorded in the book of Ezekiel would become one of the most analyzed and debated visions in human history. His account begins not with a silent sky, but with a tempest approaching from the north. He describes a great cloud with flashing fire and brilliant light emanating from within it. From the midst of this fiery storm emerged something that defied all earthly comparison. Ezekiel saw 4 living creatures, each with 4 faces and 4 wings, their legs straight and feet like burnished bronze. Beside each creature was a wheel, but this was no ordinary cartwheel. He describes a wheel intersecting another wheel, forming a structure of wheels within wheels. Their rims were immense and terrifying, he says, full of eyes all around. And most perplexing of all, these complex wheels did not need to turn to change direction. They could move in any of 4 ways without veering as they went. Above this astonishing assembly was a throne of dazzling sapphire, and upon it a figure with the likeness of a man, glowing like molten metal. For 2 millennia, this was interpreted purely as a profound, symbolic vision of the divine. The living creatures were cherubim, the wheels represented God's omnipresence, and the eyes symbolized divine omniscience. It was a mystical experience meant to be understood in a spiritual context. Then, in the 20th century, a man named Joseph Blumrich, a chief of the NASA systems layout branch who worked on projects like the Saturn V rocket and the Skylab space station, decided to take Ezekiel at his word. He applied an engineer's mind to the prophet's description. What if, Blumrich asked, we treat this not as allegory, but as a technical report from a man with no vocabulary for advanced machinery? His analysis was startling. The wheels within wheels, he proposed, could describe a type of omnidirectional landing gear or a sophisticated gyroscopic system. The straight, gleaming legs of the creatures resembled modern landing struts. The 4 faces of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle could be symbolic representations of different mechanical functions or even insignia. The fire and bright light fit the description of propulsion or exhaust. Blumrich concluded that Ezekiel's vision was a plausible, if awestruck, account of the landing of a spacecraft. This interpretation does not diminish the spiritual impact of the event for believers. Instead, it proposes a bridge. It suggests that an encounter with a technology so far beyond understanding could only be processed and communicated through the lens of the divine. The experience was real and transformative, but its source, according to this view, was not a supernatural deity in the traditional sense, but a vastly advanced intelligence utilizing craft that, to an Iron Age observer, were indistinguishable from the chariots of God. Ezekiel's vision offers a single, transformative encounter. But what if the ancient record spoke not of a visitation, but of a war? The Mahabharata, India's other monumental epic, presents a narrative of a catastrophic conflict so immense it reshaped the world. Here, the Vimanas are not just vehicles of travel, they are instruments of battle, and the weapons they carry defy any conventional understanding of ancient warfare. The text describes armaments with specific names and terrifying capabilities, far beyond the scope of swords and arrows. There is the Brahmastra, said to be invoked with a mantra and capable of destroying all creation. There is the Pasupatastra, the personal weapon of the god Shiva, described as unstoppable and capable of ending the universe itself. These are often interpreted as allegorical symbols of divine power, the ultimate consequences of unchecked rage and cosmic imbalance. Yet, nestled within these grand mythological concepts are passages of startling, clinical detail that refuse to be easily dismissed as mere poetry. The most chilling of these accounts centers on a fateful battle between the hero Arjuna and a warrior named Ashwatthama. As the conflict escalates, both invoke their most powerful celestial weapons. The epic describes the effects with a haunting specificity. It tells of winds that screamed like trumpets, of the sky raining blood, and of meteors crashing down upon the earth. But the aftermath is what truly gives pause. Survivors are described as suffering from a mysterious illness. Their hair and nails fell out, food supplies became contaminated, and the fallen on the battlefield were said to be so utterly burned that they were no longer recognizable. To a modern reader, this is a disturbingly accurate catalogue of symptoms associated with acute radiation sickness and the aftermath of a nuclear detonation. The correlation is so precise that it forces a difficult question. How could poets writing over 2,000 years ago conceive of such a specific and scientifically coherent suite of effects, long before the science of radiation was even a theoretical concept? One compelling interpretation is that the Mahabharata is not describing a mythical war of gods, but preserving a fragmented cultural memory of a very real, technologically advanced conflict. The epic, passed down orally for generations before being written, may have encoded the trauma of an event so catastrophic that its only possible description was through the language of the divine and the cosmic. The weapons were not magic, but technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from it. The war was not merely between rival families, but perhaps a conflict that leveraged powers capable of scarring the land and the human body in ways that would not be seen again until the 20th century. This theme of a lost, high-tech war echoes far beyond the borders of India, finding a strange and powerful parallel in the ruins of a desert halfway across the world. High in the thin air of the Himalayas, where the sky feels close enough to touch, another tradition preserves its own echo of the celestial chariot. The ancient Tibetan Buddhist teachings, especially the profound Kalachakra, or wheel of time, present a cosmology where science and spirit are not opposing forces, but two sides of the same sacred coin. Within these esoteric texts, knowledge of the universe is not divided into physics and philosophy. It is a single, unified understanding of reality. And woven into this tapestry of cosmic law are references that stop a modern reader cold. The scriptures speak of the iron serpent that flies in the sky. This is not a metaphor for a dragon or a simple bird. In the context of the Kalachakra, this phrase is explicitly used to describe a type of Vimana, an aerial vehicle. But here, the machine is something more. It is not merely a craft for travel or war as seen in the Indian epics. Its existence is tied directly to the great turning cycles of time and to humanity's own spiritual evolution. The technology, in this view, operates according to the same principles that govern the stars, the mind, and the path to enlightenment. It is powered not just by mercury or fire, but by a harmony with the fundamental energies of the cosmos. This presents a perspective utterly foreign to our modern, compartmentalized world. For these ancient scribes, there was no separation between the sacred and the scientific. A flying machine was a manifestation of cosmic law, a physical instrument moving in accordance with spiritual truth. The iron serpent was a piece of a much larger, living puzzle. This fusion of the mechanical and the metaphysical suggests that our ancestors may have understood these technologies not as tools to dominate nature, but as extensions of a profound and ordered universe. They saw the vehicle and its purpose as one. This holistic vision challenges us to reconsider what these artifacts truly represented. Were they simply advanced aircraft, or were they something for which we no longer have a complete word? Objects that existed at the mysterious intersection of matter, energy, and consciousness. As we move from the mountain monasteries to the sun-baked plains of another continent, we find that this theme of celestial conflict and lost knowledge was a global story, told under a different sky with strangely familiar details. The legends of India and Tibet speak of vehicles powered by cosmic law or celestial fire. But in ancient China, a different kind of story emerges, one that feels less like divine revelation and more like a secret engineering report. Here, the master of flight is not a god or a prophet, but a carpenter. His name was Lu Ban, a historical figure revered as the patron saint of Chinese builders and craftsmen, who lived around the 5th century before the Common Era. Historical texts, including the philosophical work known as the Mozi, record that Lu Ban was not just a skilled artisan, he was a brilliant inventor. He designed more effective siege weapons and scaling ladders for warfare, but his most astonishing creation was something far more personal. He built, the stories say, a wooden flying chariot. The account is remarkably straightforward. Using his unparalleled skill with timber and joints, Lu Ban constructed this vehicle and then used it to undertake a long reconnaissance flight, spying on a rival state from the air. After his mission, the tale concludes with a very human, practical detail. Fearing his wife might reveal the secret of his invention, Lu Ban deliberately dismantled the wooden chariot, hiding its blueprints from the world. This narrative stands apart from the others. There is no radiant throne, no wheels within wheels, no weapon that can end a universe. It is a grounded story of ingenuity, espionage, and deliberate secrecy. It feels like a plausible anecdote from the life of a genius inventor whose real-world mechanical achievements were already legendary. This shift in tone is profoundly significant. It demonstrates that the concept of human-made flight was not confined to the realm of the gods in the ancient mind. In China, it was filed under the category of advanced craftsmanship, a technological puzzle that a supremely talented individual could theoretically solve. The Lu Ban story represents a different cultural lens on the same mysterious possibility. It suggests that alongside the grand cosmic wars and prophetic visions, there may have existed a parallel, quieter thread of experimentation, of hands-on tinkering with the principles of aerodynamics, long before such a science had a name. The chariot was made of wood, not light metal, and its secret died with its creator, leaving behind only a tantalizing whisper in the historical record. While one civilization pondered wooden chariots, another, flourishing in the Fertile Crescent, was documenting detailed observations of objects in the sky that seemed to be made of polished, glowing stone. The story of Lu Ban's wooden chariot feels like a secret from the workshop, a tale of human ingenuity kept deliberately quiet. But to find one of the loudest, most ancient echoes of flight, we must travel back even further, to the very cradle of civilization itself. Etched into crumbling clay tablets from ancient Mesopotamia is a story so old it predates the pyramids. This is the epic of Etana, and within its mythic framework lies a description of the world from above that is chilling in its accuracy. Etana was a king, and his plight was a deeply human one. He longed for a child, an heir to continue his line. In his desperation, he sought divine help, which arrived in the form of a giant eagle. The eagle agreed to carry Etana up through the heavens to retrieve the legendary plant of birth. What follows is not just a fanciful flight. As the eagle ascends, the text provides Etana's point of view. He looks down, and what he describes is not a flat earth disk under a dome, as the cosmology of his time would have suggested. Instead, he reports that the vast sea below had shrunk to the size of a gardener's irrigation ditch. The great land masses, he says, appeared to be turned upside down. To a modern reader, this is instantly recognizable. It is the perspective of someone looking down from a tremendous height. The sea does appear as a narrow, winding band. The familiar contours of coastlines and mountains become abstract, inverted patterns. This is a profoundly correct observation of how the earth appears from the air, a perspective utterly impossible for a ground-bound Sumerian or Babylonian scribe to have experienced firsthand. So how did this detail enter one of the world's oldest stories? The eagle is clearly mythological, a symbolic creature of power and connection to the gods. But the visceral, sensory account of the ascent and the view feels different. It carries the weight of reported experience. One compelling interpretation is that the epic of Etana is weaving a profound human longing into a narrative framework that contains a fragment of ancestral memory. The story of the flight itself, the physical sensation of rising, and the shocking transformation of the landscape below may be a cultural heirloom. It could be a distant, garbled retelling of a time when such a perspective was not impossible, when someone or something did indeed look down upon the Mesopotamian plain from a great height and try to describe the impossible sight to those below. The plant of birth is the mythic goal, but the journey itself is the real mystery. It represents an ancient mind grappling with a concept aerial travel and a planetary view, for which it had no context, preserving that awe not as a technical manual, but as the core of a sacred story about hope and ascent. The view from Etana's eagle was a revelation of scale, a dizzying glimpse of a world turned to abstract art. Yet on the opposite side of the planet, under the vast, starlit skies of Australia, an entire culture has been built upon a foundation of such celestial connections for tens of thousands of years. The Aboriginal Dreamtime stories are not folklore in the way we often understand it. They are the living law, a sacred map of creation that binds the people to the land, the sky, and the deep past. Within these ancient oral traditions, some of humanity's oldest surviving narratives, we find a powerful and independent echo of the sky being's theme. Here they are known as the Wandjina. In the rock art of the Kimberley region, these figures gaze out with large, dark eyes, their bodies often painted in radiant ochre and white. Most strikingly, they are depicted with luminous halos encircling their heads and, curiously, with no mouths. The traditional explanation is profound. The Wandjina are the powerful sky beings who came from the clouds and the stars in the Dreamtime. They are the creators, the bringers of rain, and the shapers of the landscape. Their lack of a mouth signifies that their power is so immense it does not require speech. Their knowledge is transmitted directly, and their voice is the thunder. According to the traditions of the people who have cared for these images for millennia, the Wandjina did not merely visit. They arrived in something, in craft that moved through the heavens before descending to impart sacred knowledge to the first peoples and establish the natural order. This narrative, passed down through uncounted generations across an isolated continent, stands as a monumental piece of the puzzle. It did not come from trade routes or invading armies. It was not influenced by Sanskrit epics or Mesopotamian tablets. This is a story that grew from the land itself, from the oldest continuous culture on Earth. The fact that it so clearly describes advanced entities arriving from the sky in vehicles, beings who transferred wisdom and then departed or became part of the landscape, suggests something fundamental. It points to the possibility that this is not a story borrowed between cultures, but a primordial human memory. It is as if a deeply ingrained recollection of a formative event, of teachers or creators from above, was seeded into the consciousness of humanity's earliest ancestors and then expressed uniquely by each culture as they spread across the globe. The Wandjina, silent and haloed, are Australia's version of the Vimana pilots, Ezekiel's living creatures, and Etana's eagle, a testament in red ochre to a mystery written not in clay or parchment, but in the very soul of human tradition. The silent, haloed gaze of the Wandjina looks out from ancient Australian rock. Half a world away, in the dense jungles of Central America, another civilization carved its celestial knowledge into stone and wrote it into a sacred book. For the Maya, the sky was not a distant dome but a living, breathing map of time itself. Their astronomical calculations were so precise they could predict planetary movements centuries in advance, and their calendar cycles stretch into epochs far beyond our own. This profound cosmic awareness is the backdrop for their own mysterious stories of sky travelers, preserved in their great Book of Dawn, the Popol Vuh. This text is the soul of Maya mythology, recounting the adventures of the hero twins as they descend into the dark realm of Xibalba. Yet woven between these epic tales are quieter, more observational passages about the gods themselves. These deities do not simply appear, they travel, they observe. The Popol Vuh describes the forefather gods looking down upon the earth, surveying the lands and the waters from a vantage point above. This is not presented as a mystical vision, but as a simple statement of action. They saw everything under the sky, the text says. To a culture that mapped the heavens with such scientific rigor, the concept of an observational perspective from altitude seems to have been a coherent part of their cosmology. This narrative thread finds powerful visual support in Maya art. Across surviving codices and the intricate carvings on temple walls, the gods are often depicted not standing on clouds, but seated within elaborate, ornate vessels. These craft are frequently shown as long, boat-like structures, sometimes decorated with serpent heads or celestial symbols, gliding through bands that represent the sky. They are vehicles. One of the most significant figures in this context is the creator god Itzamna. He is the lord of knowledge, the bringer of writing, and the calendar, the ultimate source of wisdom and science. Significantly, he is intimately linked with the celestial realm. His name is associated with the sky, and he is sometimes depicted descending from above. When we connect these dots, the gods who travel and observe from above, the detailed iconography of sky vessels, and the association of supreme wisdom with celestial descent, a compelling pattern emerges. It suggests the Maya may have been integrating a very specific kind of memory into their worldview. The precise astronomical data they mastered could be seen as one legacy of this interaction. But the stories and the art point to something more visceral. The boat-like sky craft in the reliefs are not abstract symbols. They have weight, design, and purpose. They look like renderings of something seen. Interpreted through the lens of ancient accounts, these depictions could represent the Maya's cultural processing of encounters with advanced aerial technology. The beings who operated these craft, possessing knowledge that seemed divine, would naturally be recorded as gods. Their vehicles became the celestial boats of Itzamna, and their observational missions became the surveyed journeys described in the Popol Vuh. For the Maya, there was no conflict between high science and sacred story. Their entire civilization was built on that unity. So when they carved a god in a flying boat, they may have been doing exactly what we do today, recording the most advanced and awe-inspiring reality they knew, blending precise observation with the profound mystery of its origin. The intricate carvings of Maya skyboats fade into the mist of a different highland, far to the north. Here, in the green hills of Ireland, a legend endures of a people who did not cross the sea, but conquered the sky itself. They were the Tuatha de Danann, a tribe whose name translates to the people of the goddess Danu. Their story, preserved in medieval manuscripts like the Liber Gabala Iren, the Book of Invasions, tells of an arrival that defied all logic of the ancient world. They did not sail to Ireland's shores in longships. According to the texts, they arrived in dark clouds, descending from the air itself to land upon the mountaintops, shrouded in a great, concealing mist. This single, vivid detail shifts their entire narrative from a simple migration myth into something far more mysterious. The accounts specify they came in ships, but ships that moved through the sky, not over water. This image of aerial vessels landing on high peaks is not a common feature of Celtic folklore. It is a specific, anomalous event recorded as the foundational moment for a race described as masters of both magic and technology. They brought with them 4 great treasures, each representing a pinnacle of skill and power. There was the Lia Fail, the stone of destiny, which would cry out when the true king stood upon it. There was the unbreakable sword of Nuada, which no enemy could escape. There was the spear of Lug, which guaranteed victory in battle. and there was the cauldron of the Dagda, from which no company ever went away unsatisfied. These are not just magical trinkets, they are instruments of sovereignty, justice, sustenance, and invincibility, the foundational tools for building and governing a superior civilization. The Tuatha De Danann used these gifts, combined with their profound knowledge, to become the rulers of Ireland, later retreating into the hollow hills to become the fairy folk of later legend. What makes their story so compelling within our global pattern is its structure. A technologically and culturally advanced people arrive via aerial means, introduce transformative artifacts and knowledge, and fundamentally alter the course of the land's history. This is the Celtic expression of the sky god narrative, devoid of chariots of fire or wheels within wheels, but rich with the imagery of mist-shrouded peaks and ships that navigate the clouds. It demonstrates that this archetype is not bound to deserts or jungles or the Indian subcontinent. It is a story that took root in the damp, verdant imagination of Northern Europe, proving that the memory or the idea of celestial arrivals was a seed that could grow in any soil, adapting to local color but always retaining its core, the awe-inspiring vision of those who came from above. The mist-shrouded peaks of Ireland hold the memory of sky ships, but the sun-scorched lands of the Mediterranean tell a story of a sky vehicle that failed. In the pantheon of Greek mythology, among the tales of heroes and monsters, lies a narrative of pure cosmic accident. It is the story of Phaethon, the mortal son of the sun god Helios. This is more than a simple fable about a boy who flew too high. It is a detailed, visceral account of a technological catastrophe, framed in the only language the ancients had, the language of gods and chariots. The myth follows a clear, tragic arc. Phaethon, seeking proof of his divine lineage, asks his father for the ultimate privilege, to drive the solar chariot across the sky for a single day. Helios reluctantly agrees, warning his son of the immense power and precise path required. But Phaethon, unable to control the fiery steeds, loses his grip. The chariot plunges too close to the earth. The Roman poet Ovid, centuries later, would describe the consequences with horrifying clarity. He writes of rivers boiling away until their beds were dry, of the earth cracking open in great fissures, of forests erupting into flame and entire cities reduced to ash. The myth says this fiery, erratic path created the great deserts of Libya and turned the skin of the Ethiopian people dark. To stop the global conflagration, Zeus is forced to intervene, striking Phaethon down with a thunderbolt before the world is utterly consumed. On its surface, this is a powerful allegory about the danger of hubris, of reaching for power one cannot possibly master. Yet, when we strip away the divine characters, the core of the story remains a specific and coherent sequence of events. A piloted vehicle radiating intense heat and light follows an erratic, low-altitude trajectory, causing widespread thermal devastation and geological trauma before being destroyed by a powerful external force. This is not the description of a simple wildfire or a drought. This is a systemic, global-scale thermal event. This precise correlation has led researchers from various fields to look beyond allegory. Some, like the archaeologist Dr. Arthur Posnanski in his extensive work on the ancient South American site of Tiahuanaco, have pointed to the global prevalence of fire and flood myths. They propose that stories like Phaethon's could be the cultural memory of a real astronomical near-disaster, such as a large comet or asteroid passing terrifyingly close to Earth. The gravitational and thermal effects of such a pass could indeed scorch continents, boil seas, and trigger seismic chaos. To the people witnessing it, the comet's fiery tail and brilliant nucleus streaking across the heavens would look exactly like a chariot of fire careening out of control. The thunderbolt of Zeus that ends the event could symbolize the atmospheric explosion or impact of a fragment. This interpretation transforms the myth from a moral lesson into a potential eyewitness account, encoded in symbolic language for transmission across hundreds of generations. It aligns perfectly with our growing theme, whether it describes the malfunction of an advanced craft or the flyby of a celestial body. The Phaethon narrative represents another ancient civilization's attempt to document a cataclysmic encounter with a sky-born power, a memory of the day the sky itself turned against the earth, preserved not as history but as a warning etched in myth. The skies of Greece still echoed with the imagined crackle of Phaethon's doomed flight when, far to the north, a different kind of thunder rolled across the frozen fjords. In the stark, unforgiving world of the Norse, power was not a chariot lost to youthful folly, but a hammer gripped in a warrior's fist, and the vehicle of the gods was built for war. The Eddas, those ancient collections of Norse poetry and prose, introduce us to Thor, the red-bearded protector of mankind. His might is legendary, but his method of travel is what captures our attention. Thor does not simply stride across the Rainbow Bridge Bifrost. He rides, his chariot, a massive, sturdy construct, is pulled by two supernatural goats, Tangrisnir and Tangjoster. The descriptions are vivid. When Thor cracks his whip, this chariot does not merely roll across the earth. It flies through the storm-laden skies, the wheels thundering, the goats' hooves striking lightning from the clouds. His passage is an atmospheric event, shaking mountains and splitting the sky with flashes of light. On one level, this is magnificent mythology, a symbolic expression of a storm's raw power given a face and a story. Yet, when placed alongside the Vimanas of India or the sky boats of the Maya, a fascinating pattern emerges. The Norse, like so many other cultures, conceptualized their most powerful deity not as an omnipresent spirit, but as a being who required a vehicle for rapid transit and warfare. The chariot is Thor's delivery system, the technology that brings his devastating force to bear wherever it is needed across the 9 realms. This is not a casual detail. It reflects a specific way of thinking about divine agency. Power in this worldview is something that moves, something that is deployed from a point of origin to a distant battlefield. The chariot becomes the indispensable instrument of that deployment. This technological framing reaches its ultimate expression in the Norse vision of the cosmos itself. Their entire universe is engineered for conflict, destined for Ragnarok, the final, cataclysmic war where gods, giants, and monsters will clash in an ultimate battle that ends one world and begins another. The imagery is one of sieges, of great weapons being wielded, of landscapes shattered. In such a cosmos, it feels perfectly logical that the gods would have the best equipment. Thor's flying chariot is the Viking imagination projecting its understanding of cosmic order onto a technological canvas. It is their answer to the same profound question other cultures asked: how do beings of supreme power traverse the vast distances between realms to wage their eternal wars? The answer, from the icy north to the humid jungles, was consistently the same. They flew in machines that made the very elements obey their command. The thunder of Thor's chariot fades, leaving us on the shores of a river that was not just a source of water, but a mirror of the heavens themselves. For the ancient Egyptians, the Nile's predictable flow was the heartbeat of their world, a sacred reflection of a greater, celestial journey happening above them each and every day. Their sun god Ra did not simply appear in the morning sky. He embarked on a perilous, meticulously scheduled voyage. This was the journey of the solar bark, a vessel known as the Manjet. In countless tomb paintings, temple carvings, and passages from texts like the Book of the Dead, we see this same vivid scene. Ra stands majestically within an ornate, elongated boat, shaped much like the papyrus skiffs that plied the Nile, yet this craft glides not on water, but through the air of the day sky and the terrifying depths of the nighttime underworld. His mission is constant and it is critical. Each night, as the bark travels through the realm of Tuatha, it is attacked by the colossal serpent of chaos, Apophis. Ra and the other deities aboard must fight it back, ensuring the bark completes its circuit so the sun can rise again, preserving the cosmic order known as Mat. On one level, this is a perfect allegory. It explains the sun's daily cycle, the struggle between order and chaos, and the necessity of ritual to keep the universe functioning. The symbolism is beautiful and complete, yet the sheer consistency and detail of this imagery across millennia gives us pause. This was not a vague concept. The solar bark had specific design elements, a defined crew of deities with specific roles, and it followed a charted, dangerous route. It was, in the Egyptian mind, a real vessel operating in a non-physical realm. But what if we shift our perspective slightly? What if this detailed, repeated narrative of a celestial vehicle navigating a hazardous, structured path is not just a metaphor for a natural cycle, but a mythological rendering of something else entirely? Consider the possibility through the lens of the other accounts we have heard. A craft, perhaps technologically advanced, is observed traversing the sky on a predictable route. The ancient observers, with no concept of orbital mechanics or spacecraft, interpret its brilliant light as the sun itself. They see it vanish into the horizon and imagine it must be traveling through a dangerous subterranean realm. The serpent Apophis, then, could symbolize a very real peril of that journey, perhaps radiation belts, debris fields, or other cosmic hazards that threatened the integrity of the vessel. The other gods on the bark are not just passengers, they are specialists, each performing a function essential to the mission's success, much like a crew on a modern spacecraft. This interpretation does not diminish the spiritual power of the myth. Instead, it proposes a profound origin for its compelling details. The Egyptians were master observers of patterns. They mapped the stars with precision and built their civilization on predictable cycles. The story of the solar bark feels less like an invented fantasy and more like an attempt to explain a persistent, awe-inspiring observation, a brilliant object moving on a fixed celestial highway, protected by powers the people could not comprehend. They encoded this mystery into their religion, making the vessel essential to cosmic order because to them it was. The line between a symbolic vessel and a reported technological object becomes beautifully, intriguingly blurred, suggesting that for the Egyptians, those who sailed the bark were, in every sense that mattered, beings who came from the stars. While the Egyptians envisioned a cosmic bark navigating the heavens, a text from another ancient culture presents something far more direct, a technical manual. The Samaranga Sutradhara, a comprehensive Sanskrit work often translated as the architect of the battlefield, is not a book of mythology or epic poetry. It is a treatise on architecture, mechanics, and statecraft, yet within its practical pages lies an entire chapter dedicated solely to the science of aeronautics, a chapter that stands as one of the most methodical and challenging documents in this entire mystery. This text moves decisively beyond the grand narratives of the Mahabharata or the symbolic visions of other cultures. It reads like an engineer's notebook. It describes in systematic detail the construction of Vimanas. It outlines procedures for takeoff, for cruising vast distances, and specifically for vertical landing. The text even delves into propulsion systems, mentioning the use of specific liquids, likely mercury, in conjunction with heating apparatuses to generate motive power. This is not a story about gods, it is a set of instructions. The most profound line in this entire technical chapter, however, is not about mechanics. It is about purpose. The text states plainly, by means of these machines, human beings can fly in the air and heavenly beings can come down to earth. This single sentence acts as a powerful conceptual bridge. It explicitly links human technological achievement with the capability for celestial beings to make contact. It frames the Vimana not as a divine chariot reserved for gods, but as a vehicle, a piece of technology that could facilitate travel and communication between two different realms of existence. This transforms the narrative completely. It suggests the ancients saw this technology not as magic, but as a point of contact, a shared apparatus that could be built and operated by humanity to ascend, or used by those from above to descend. The Samaranga Sutradhara's clinical, instructional tone is what makes it so compelling and so perplexing to modern researchers. It does not speak in the language of awe-struck prophets or epic poets describing cosmic wars. It speaks in the language of materials, processes, and operational protocols. This shifts the entire discussion from the realm of vague legend into the territory of potential historical engineering documents. It forces a very difficult question. Why would the authors of a serious, encyclopedic work on statecraft and mechanics devote an entire chapter to the precise, step-by-step instructions for building something that was, according to our standard history, utterly impossible for their era? Were they engaging in a purely theoretical exercise, a kind of ancient speculative fiction? Or were they documenting a science that was known, perhaps practiced in a forgotten age, and then preserved in these texts as a sacred and vital form of knowledge? The Samaranga Sutradhara provides no easy answers, but it offers something perhaps more valuable, some of the most detailed textual evidence we have that the dream of flight, and the memory of those who mastered it, was once considered not a fantasy, but a branch of practical science. The Samaranga Sutradhara's technical language frames flight as a shared science, a potential bridge between realms. But what happens when that bridge is crossed, and the knowledge itself becomes a source of profound conflict? For an answer, we must turn to one of the most controversial and influential texts outside the traditional biblical canon, the Book of Enoch. This ancient work, revered in certain Jewish and early Christian traditions yet excluded from most later scriptures, presents a narrative that is not a veiled technical manual, but a direct moral indictment. It tells the story of the Watchers. These were not gods in chariots or silent sky beings, but angelic entities assigned to watch over humanity. According to Enoch, they made a fateful choice. They descended to earth, took human wives, and in doing so broke a sacred boundary. Their transgression went beyond intermingling. They began to teach. The knowledge they imparted was specific and transformative. They instructed humanity in the arts of metallurgy, revealing how to forge swords and craft shields. They taught the making of jewelry and the use of cosmetics. They unveiled the secrets of root cutting and astrology, the observation of the stars and the signs of the earth. This was a comprehensive curriculum in civilization's tools, from warfare to agriculture to celestial science. In the framework of the text, this was not a benevolent gift. It was a corrupting influence, a flood of advanced understanding that humanity was not spiritually prepared to handle. The result, as Enoch describes it, was a rapid descent into violence, greed, and cosmic imbalance, ultimately leading to a great cleansing. The parallels to our global pattern are impossible to ignore. Here, once again, are advanced beings descending from above. They transfer concrete technological knowledge, specifically including the arts of metalwork and weaponry. And this transfer is directly linked to a subsequent era of great strife and a cataclysmic reset. The Book of Enoch provides something unique, however, a clear ethical lens. It frames this entire event not as a war among gods or a mechanical accident, but as a foundational mistake, a violation of a divine order. This narrative offers a powerful theological and philosophical counterpart to the ancient astronaut hypothesis. It suggests that if such beings did interact with early humanity, the consequences were deeply complex. The knowledge they brought may have accelerated human development, but at a terrible spiritual or social cost. The story of the Watchers transforms the mystery from a simple question of technology into a profound dilemma about wisdom, responsibility, and the perils of receiving power before one is ready to wield it. It asks us to consider whether some ancient memories are not just records of wonder, but also cautionary tales, warning that the sky holds not only vehicles, but also choices with echoes that last for ages. While the Book of Enoch framed celestial knowledge as a dangerous transgression, another epic from India presents a starkly different vision, one where a flying machine is not a weapon of war but a magnificent symbol of restoration. The Ramayana, the other pillar of ancient Indian literature alongside the Mahabharata, centers its narrative on the noble Prince Rama, his exile, and his quest to rescue his wife Sita from the powerful demon king Ravana. The climax of this sweeping story delivers not just a victory but a vehicle. This is the Pushpaka Vimana, a flying palace of breathtaking splendor. Its origins are detailed within the epic itself. It was originally crafted by the divine architect Vishvakarma for Kebra, the god of wealth, making it a masterpiece of celestial engineering. Ravana, in his arrogance, seized this magnificent craft, adding it to his own legendary arsenal. Upon Ravana's defeat, Rama does not destroy this prize. He claims it, and he uses it for a profoundly human purpose: to go home. The description of the Pushpaka Vimana is one of awe-inspiring utility. The text says it was self-propelled, obeying the mental or verbal commands of its master. It was spacious enough to carry not just Rama and Sita, but his entire victorious army and allies. It is said to move at the will of the rider, soaring through the skies, its exterior shining with a brilliance like the sun. This account is pivotal because of its tone. Unlike the cataclysmic weapons of the Mahabharata, the Pushpaka Vimana is not an instrument of annihilation. It is a means of transportation, a luxurious and efficient vehicle for a royal return. Its inclusion in the narrative feels remarkably matter-of-fact. The epic does not present it as a miraculous, one-time divine intervention. It is treated as an artifact, a piece of advanced technology that exists within the world's inventory, changing hands from one powerful ruler to another, much like a crown or a sacred sword. This normalization is what makes it so fascinating. The Ramayana offers us a glimpse into how such technology might have been integrated into a legendary society. It was a status symbol, a practical tool for governance and travel, a vehicle that could follow voice commands long before the concept of artificial intelligence existed. The Pushpaka Vimana story suggests that within the framework of these ancient histories, flying machines were not always seen as terrifying or otherworldly. They could be magnificent, yes, but they were also functional, a part of the expected machinery of power and ceremony. This shifts the mystery from one of pure conflict to one of cultural integration, asking us to envision a past where the sky was not just a battlefield, but a highway for kings. The Pushpaka Vimana was a vehicle of restoration, a graceful machine returning a hero to his rightful place. But the dream of flight is not always so elegant or so wisely used. In the sweeping verses of the Persian Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, we find a story where that ambition curdles into dangerous folly. This epic, composed by the poet Ferdowsi around the year 1000, collected and preserved the ancient pre-Islamic legends of Persia, and within them lies the cautionary tale of Shah-Kavas. His is not a story of advanced technology inherited from the gods, but of raw human ingenuity applied with breathtaking arrogance. Dissatisfied with ruling the earth, Kavas desired to conquer the sky itself. His method was startlingly direct. He ordered the construction of a special throne, and then he had his men capture powerful eagles. These great birds were tethered to the four corners of the throne, and above them, they fastened spears with pieces of meat impaled on the tips. The plan was brutally simple. The eagles, straining to reach the meat they could never quite attain, would flap their wings furiously, lifting the throne and its royal passenger up into the blue expanse. And according to the legend, it worked. Kavas ascended, borne aloft by the frantic, captive birds, in a grotesque and literal enactment of the phrase "reaching for the heavens." This narrative stands in stark contrast to the sleek Vimanas or the divine chariots. There is no Mercury engine, no self-propelled brilliance. This is flight achieved through force, through the coercion of nature in the service of a king's overweening pride. The story does not end in glorious exploration, but in disaster. The eagles, exhausted and confused, eventually plunge the throne back to earth, a humiliating fall that serves as the epic's moral verdict on the king's hubris. Yet, for all its mythical primitiveness, the tale of the flying throne is profoundly significant. It demonstrates that the aspiration for celestial travel was not confined to cultures with stories of ready-made godly vehicles. Here in Persia, the ambition was so powerful that it generated its own mythology of achievement, however flawed. The Shahnameh is not just a collection of stories, it is the very soul of Persian cultural identity, compiled at a time of great change to preserve a nation's ancient spirit. That this story of a king's aerial ambition holds a central place within it tells us something vital. The desire to ascend, to literally elevate one's station to touch the realm of the sky, was deeply woven into the concept of kingship and human potential. It was an archetype powerful enough to shape national legend. Kavas's flying throne may be a myth of failure, but its existence is a testament to a universal and enduring dream. It represents humanity's earliest, most visceral attempts to engineer its way into the firmament, a raw and ambitious thread in the global tapestry, proving that long before blueprints and physics, the human will to fly was already crafting its own stories, warning of the fall that often follows too high a climb. The story of a king's flying throne speaks to ambition, but the knowledge of the Dogon people speaks to something else entirely, a legacy of celestial precision passed down for generations. In the remote Bandiagara escarpment of Mali, West Africa, the Dogon tribe has preserved an oral tradition that contains a scientific mystery of the first order. For centuries, their priests have spoken of the star system Sirius, the brightest star in our night sky, but their knowledge goes far deeper than simple observation. Their traditions describe Sirius as having a tiny, incredibly dense companion star, an invisible twin that orbits it every 50 years. They call this companion star Potolo, and they say it is made of a metal heavier than iron, a substance they call Sagala. To the modern astronomer, this description is astonishingly accurate. The star Sirius does indeed have a white dwarf companion, Sirius B, which is invisible to the naked eye, incredibly dense, and orbits Sirius in a cycle of 50.1 years. This fact was not confirmed by Western astronomy until the 19th century with powerful telescopes. The Dogon, however, have known it for what they claim is millennia. The question of how they acquired this data has sparked intense debate. Some anthropologists suggest potential, though contested, historical contact with European astronomers. Yet the Dogon themselves offer a far more profound explanation, one that is woven into the very fabric of their cosmology. They say this knowledge, along with a deep understanding of the solar system and the structure of the galaxy, was given to them by visitors. These were the Nommo, described as amphibious, fish-like beings. The Nommo are said to have come from the Sirius system. Their arrival was not a silent drift from the stars. Dogon oral history describes a great event, an ark descending from the sky amid a whirlwind of fire, thunder, and a deafening noise. This vessel, they say, spun violently as it landed, churning up the earth and water. The descriptions are vivid and sensory, focusing on the motion, the sound, and the impact of the craft. Once landed, the Nommo emerged. They are depicted as teachers, dividing their bodies to nourish the people and imparting the foundations of civilization, agriculture, law, and most significantly, the map of the heavens. The combination here is what makes the Dogon account so compelling within our global pattern. It is not just a story of sky beings, nor is it merely an isolated piece of advanced astronomy. It is the fusion of the two, a detailed technical observation inextricably linked to a narrative of contact and knowledge transfer. The Dogon tradition presents the Nommo not as conquerors or gods of war, but as civilizing instructors, echoing the themes of the Watchers or the sky beings of Aboriginal lore, yet with a specific, verifiable scientific anchor. This account stands as a powerful, independent pillar in the architecture of ancient mysteries. It emerged from an isolated African culture, untouched by the Sanskrit epics or Mesopotamian clay tablets. Its existence suggests that the impulse to record encounters with advanced celestial teachers and the precise cosmic knowledge that came with them was not a cultural export, but a human experience that could, and did, occur under any sky, waiting to be remembered in the stories told around the fire for 1,000 generations. The Dogon tradition links celestial knowledge to a specific, distant star, but the foundations of belief in sky-born teachers may have been laid much earlier in the humid heartlands of ancient Mexico. Long before the Maya charted the stars or the Aztecs built their pyramids, the Olmec civilization flourished, a culture so foundational it is often called the mother of Mesoamerica. They left behind no deciphered written records, no epic poems to decode. Their story is told in stone, in colossal heads weighing many tons, and in smaller, far more enigmatic figurines. Among their most pervasive and puzzling icons are the so-called Were-Jaguar figures. These are not majestic animals, but strange, infantile beings with downturned mouths, often featuring a distinctive cleft or V-shaped indentation in the top of the head. To the conventional archaeologist, these represent a fusion of human and jaguar traits, possibly symbolizing shamanic transformation or a rain deity. Yet to other eyes, these features suggest something else entirely. The cleft head, rather than a birth defect or symbolic motif, bears an uncanny resemblance to the seam of a helmet or a sophisticated headpiece. The puffy, almost swollen features could be interpreted not as infantile, but as the depiction of a being wearing a form-fitting suit or mask, perhaps one designed for an environment different from the tropical lowlands. This is speculation, of course, but it is speculation prompted by the sheer oddness of the imagery when viewed outside a purely mythological box. The Olmecs were master sculptors, capable of stunning realism in their colossal portraits. The deliberate, repeated choice to depict these particular, non-human features suggests they were representing something they had seen, or a memory they felt compelled to preserve in jade and basalt. Their silence as a culture forces us to look to their heirs for translation. The Maya and Aztec civilizations, which rose millennia later, inherited the Olmec's cultural and religious framework. In their detailed pantheons, the idea of the sky visitor becomes explicit and vivid. The feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, central to both Maya and Aztec belief, is not merely a god of wind and wisdom. His origin story is clear. He is a celestial being who arrives from the stars, bringing the gifts of civilization, including agriculture, the calendar, and moral law, before departing with a promise to return. The Aztec chronicles describe his arrival and departure in a serpent of light across the sky. This narrative arc of a benevolent teacher from the heavens fits perfectly into the pattern we have seen across the world. The Olmec Were-Jaguar, then, may represent the earliest, most abstract formulation of this idea in the Americas, a primal icon that later cultures would refine into the detailed god forms of Quetzalcoatl or Itzamna. The Olmecs did not need to write the story down. They carved its essence into stone, establishing a visual vocabulary of the celestial visitor that would resonate through the temples and codices of their successors for thousands of years, proving that some messages are too profound for words alone, meant instead to be felt in the weight of an ancient, watching gaze. The Olmecs carved their mystery in stone, but the Slavic peoples wove theirs into the very fabric of their fairy tales. Across the vast forests and plains of Eastern Europe, from Russia to Ukraine, a persistent story is told, a story not of gods but of a clever peasant. His challenge is to win the hand of a princess, and his key to success is not a sword or a spell, but a vehicle. He must build a flying ship. In these tales, collected by folklorists like Alexander Afanasiev, the ship is described with a sense of wondrous practicality. It is often made of silver or gold, capable of soaring above the clouds at incredible speed, responding to the commands of its pilot. The hero, sometimes with the help of mystical forest beings, succeeds in constructing this marvel. He then uses it to complete impossible tasks, outwit rivals, and ultimately claim his royal reward. On the surface, this is classic fairy tale logic, a magical object enabling a rags-to-riches journey. Yet, when we place it alongside the Vimanas and celestial chariots, a fascinating distinction emerges. In the Slavic tradition, the flying ship is not a divine artifact reserved for deities. It is something a resourceful human can, under the right circumstances, actually build. The technology, however fantastical, is presented as attainable. This represents a subtle but profound shift in the archetype. Here, advanced aerial technology is democratized. It becomes a tool for human ambition and cleverness within a mythical past, a lever that allows the common person to interact with and even ascend to the highest levels of their world. The persistence of this specific motif across countless Slavic cultures suggests it is more than a random plot device. It feels like an ancient memory, a folk echo of a time when the concept of human-made flight was not an impossible dream, but a conceivable part of the legendary past. These stories do not speak of cosmic wars or world-ending weapons. They speak of opportunity, of a vehicle that bridges social divides and makes the extraordinary achievable. This folk memory offers a uniquely human-centered perspective on the mystery, reminding us that the deepest legends are not always about the power of gods, but about the latent potential of humanity itself, and the enduring dream that we, too, might one day craft our own keys to the sky. Across the Slavic forests, the flying ship was a folk dream of ascent, but across the sea in ancient Japan, the descent from heaven was the very foundation of imperial authority. The Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki, Japan's oldest chronicles compiled in the 8th century, are not simple storybooks. They are sacred records, meticulously crafted to document the divine origins of the islands and the unbroken lineage of its emperors, who trace their ancestry directly to the sun goddess Amaterasu. Within these foundational texts lies a pivotal moment of celestial transition. The tale centers on Ninigi no Mikoto, the grandson of Amaterasu. Charged with bringing order to the earthly realm, he prepares to leave the plane of high heaven. His journey downward is described with potent, symbolic imagery. The texts speak of him crossing the floating bridge of heaven, a nebulous, ethereal path. More concretely, some interpretations and later traditions hold that he descended in an Ama no Iwafune, a heavenly rock ship. The descriptions are not technical manuals. There are no details of propulsion or control panels. The vessel is presented as a monolithic, divine object, a craft of stone from the realm of the gods. Its purpose, however, is crystal clear. It served as the means of conveyance, the vehicle that carried the divine progenitor from his celestial home to the mortal world, transforming him from a heavenly being into the first earthly sovereign. This narrative is not merely a charming myth. It is a core piece of state ideology, a spiritual and political document designed to legitimize the ruling family by anchoring their right to rule in a cosmic event. The symbolism is profound and mirrors patterns we have seen across the globe. The founder, the bringer of culture and order, does not emerge from a cave or cross a mountain pass. He descends, he arrives via a specialized vehicle that bridges the unimaginable gap between the realm of advanced, luminous power and the raw, untamed earth. In Ireland, it was the mist-shrouded ships of the Tuatha de Danann. In Persia, it was the eagle throne of Kay Kavas, In India, it was the Pushpaka Vimana. And in Japan, it was the heavenly rock ship, each culture using its own unique symbolic language, whether mist, eagles, palaces, or floating stone, preserved the same essential memory, or perhaps articulated the same profound archetype. A civilization's beginning is marked not by a slow crawl out of primitivism, but by a deliberate arrival from above, an event that infuses the land with a sacred mandate and a connection to a source of knowledge that transcends the ordinary. The Japanese legend, sparse as it is, completes a circle. It shows that this idea of celestial founders was not confined to the continents or the deserts. It flourished on an island nation at the edge of the known world, proving that the story of the sky-born ancestor was a seed carried on the winds of human consciousness, ready to take root and define a people's identity wherever it landed. The heavenly rock ship of Japan anchored a dynasty to the stars, but another sacred vessel was said to hold the very presence of the divine within its gilded walls. Deep in the highlands of Ethiopia rests a legend that forms the spiritual bedrock of a nation, the Kebra Nagast, the glory of kings. This ancient text, revered as the ultimate source of imperial legitimacy, weaves a tale of royal lineage, sacred theft, and an artifact of unimaginable power, the Ark of the Covenant. The narrative is majestic in its scope. It recounts the famed visit of the Queen of Sheba to the wise King Solomon in Jerusalem. From their union, the epic says, came a son, Menelik I, the progenitor of Ethiopia's Solomonic dynasty. But the story does not end with a birthright. It accelerates into a journey of profound spiritual and physical transference. When Menelik comes of age, he travels to his father's court. There, guided by a divine plan, he and a group of companions perform a momentous act. They do not merely receive a blessing or a copy of the law. They take the Ark itself, the very chest said to contain the tablets of the Ten Commandments, from the heart of Solomon's temple, and carry it back to Ethiopia, where tradition holds it remains to this day in the sacred city of Axum. This is far more than a story about moving a religious relic. The Kebra Nagast describes the Ark not as a simple gold-covered box, but as a focal point of terrifying, active force. Biblical accounts already hint at its dangerous nature, speaking of priests being struck down for improper handling, and of its ability to lead the Israelites as a pillar of cloud and fire. The Ethiopian tradition amplifies this. It speaks of the Ark possessing its own agency, capable of levitating to lighten the load for its rightful carriers, or becoming impossibly heavy for those who would steal it. It is depicted as emitting a radiant, potentially lethal energy, a divine fire that could both illuminate and consume. In essence, the Ark is portrayed as a mobile reactor of sacred power, an object that blurs the line between a spiritual symbol and a piece of potent, enigmatic technology. This portrayal is what draws the gaze of researchers looking for patterns in ancient texts. While clearly not a flying machine in the sense of a piloted chariot, the Ark fits perfectly within the broader theme of advanced, energy-manipulating artifacts guarded as sacred relics. Its described behaviors, levitation, directional guidance, and emission of controlled plasma-like energy, do not sound like magic to a modern engineer. They sound like the reported effects of a high-voltage capacitor, an electromechanical device, or a sophisticated communication instrument interacting with its environment. The ancient astronaut theory proposes that the Ark could have been exactly that, a technological device of unknown origin, interpreted and ritualized by a culture that experienced its effects but did not understand its underlying science. The priests elaborate precautions, the specific instructions for its construction using conductive gold and insulating acacia wood, and the dire consequences of touching it all read like safety protocols for handling unstable and powerful equipment. The Kebra Nagast, therefore, offers a unique variation on the mystery. It presents an object of immense power that is not a vehicle for travel, but a portable, interactive device. Its journey from Jerusalem to Axum becomes a story of technology transfer, of a civilization safeguarding what it believed was the ultimate source of divine authority, a tangible piece of heaven's power now resting in a humble chapel, waiting for the world to understand the true nature of its glory. The Ark of the Covenant was a portable, sacred instrument of immense power, but the story of Atlantis is a memory of an entire civilization that wielded such power and then lost everything. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, the Greek philosopher Plato does something remarkable. He does not present a myth, he presents what he insists is a true historical account, passed down from Egyptian priests to the lawgiver Solon. This account describes a formidable island nation called Atlantis, a society so advanced it seemed to belong to a different age. Plato details its grand circular canals, its bustling harbors capable of holding vast fleets, and its magnificent buildings sheathed in precious metals. The Atlanteans, he writes, possessed a power and a technology that far surpassed the known world of their time. Their ambition grew with their might, and they embarked on a campaign of conquest that brought them into conflict with a surprisingly resilient opponent, a primitive but virtuous Athens. This war between a hyper-advanced empire and a modest city-state forms the core of Plato's tale. While he never explicitly describes flying machines, the sheer scale of Atlantean engineering and the formidable nature of their power invite speculation. Their civilization operated on a level that, to the ancient Athenians of the story, would have appeared godlike or otherworldly. The cataclysm that ends Atlantis is swift and absolute. Plato states that in one terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island sank beneath the sea, vanishing forever. This narrative, framed as sober history by one of the West's foundational thinkers, adds a profound layer of philosophical credibility to the idea of a forgotten, advanced culture. It moves the discussion from the realm of religious epics and folk tales into the arena of recorded, if elusive, historical tradition. The conflict Plato describes is not a war among gods in the heavens, but a global war between two earthly societies of vastly different technological stages. This mirrors the themes we have seen elsewhere, a clash between a sophisticated, perhaps celestial-derived culture and an older, more rooted one. The utter destruction of Atlantis, swallowed by the ocean, provides a hauntingly plausible explanation for why no physical evidence of such a civilization might remain. It becomes a metaphor for the fragility of even the greatest achievements, and a warning that the tools of immense power can lead to a downfall as complete as it is sudden. Plato's account forces us to ask whether Atlantis was a philosophical allegory about hubris, as many scholars believe, or whether it was his attempt to preserve a genuine, fragmented memory of a pre-flood world, a world where the lines between human history and the advanced knowledge of sky-born teachers had not yet been fully erased. Plato's Lost Island speaks of a civilization erased by the sea, but a fragile scrap of papyrus may record a single afternoon when the sky itself seemed to break protocol. Among the most contentious entries in this entire collection is a document known as the Tully Papyrus. Unlike the grand epics or sacred manuals, this text, if authentic, would be something far more mundane and therefore far more compelling. It is presented as a translation of an administrative report from the reign of the Egyptian pharaoh Thutmose III, around the year 1450 before the Common Era. The account is startlingly direct. It states that in the third hour of the day, scribes and priests witnessed circles of fire approaching from the skies. These objects, brighter than the sun, are described as moving in formation before eventually heading south and disappearing. The language is clinical, observational, and completely devoid of the mythological framework that shapes so many other accounts. There are no gods named, no divine chariots described, no cosmic battles inferred. It reads like a bureaucratic entry, a matter-of-fact notation of an anomalous event that disrupted the normal order of the day, recorded for the royal archives because it was simply unexplained. This very plainness is what makes the Tully Papyrus so fascinating and so fiercely debated. For many mainstream Egyptologists, the document is considered a modern fabrication. The original papyrus has never been produced for study, and the translation comes through a circuitous path that raises legitimate questions about its provenance. Scholars point out that the phrasing and style do not perfectly match other known Egyptian administrative texts from that period. The debate around its authenticity is not a minor footnote, it is the central issue. This single document sits at the heart of a critical divide between conventional academic history and alternative historical research. Its inclusion in discussions like this one forces a necessary and healthy confrontation with a fundamental question: how do we verify the sources of our most extraordinary claims? If the papyrus is a hoax, it serves as a cautionary tale about the desire to find modern phenomena in ancient texts. Yet if by some chance it is genuine, its implications are profound. It would provide a snapshot not of myth-making but of witnessing. It would be a record of Egyptian officials trained to observe and document, applying their skills to something for which they had no category. They called them circles of fire because that was the only term that fit. A genuine Tully papyrus would represent the closest thing we have to an ancient UFO report, stripped of theology and epic poetry, leaving only the bare, puzzling facts of an encounter with the unknown. This tension between skepticism and possibility is essential to the entire journey. It reminds us that the search for truth in humanity's deepest past requires both an open mind and a rigorous demand for evidence, a balance between wonder and scrutiny, as we turn from the dry bureaucracy of Egypt to the living, breathing stone of a jungle temple halfway across the world. The debate over the Tully papyrus hinges entirely on the question of a source's authenticity, a challenge that reaches its peak with perhaps the most controversial document in this entire collection. In the year 1867, a manuscript surfaced in the Netherlands that would ignite a firestorm of debate which still burns today. This is the Oura Linda book, a text written in an unusual dialect of Old Frisian on pages of treated linen. Its contents, if genuine, would be nothing short of revolutionary. It claims to be a chronicle, a family history passed down through generations of Frisian women, stretching back over 4,000 years. Within its pages lies the detailed story of a lost Nordic civilization of staggering sophistication, a land called Atland. This Atland, which many readers quickly equated with Plato's Atlantis, is described as a society governed by a matriarchal council, possessing advanced laws, skilled in global navigation, and in tune with a sacred natural order. The chronicle gives this paradise a very specific expiration date, stating it was swallowed by the sea in the year 2193 before the Common Era, the victim of a sudden and catastrophic geological upheaval. For those searching for a tangible, textual link to a forgotten golden age, the Oura Linda book seemed like a miraculous discovery, a first-hand account from the lost world itself. The problem, however, is that nearly all academic linguists and historians who have examined it have reached a firm and nearly unanimous verdict. They declare it a clever and elaborate hoax, a fabrication created in the 19th century. The language, they argue, is an inconsistent pastiche. The paper and ink, while old, are not nearly old enough to match its claimed antiquity. The societal structure it describes seems suspiciously tailored to modern romantic ideals about peaceful, nature-worshipping ancestors. For mainstream scholarship, the case is closed, yet the book refuses to fade into obscurity. It persists, championed in alternative history circles, and by those who feel its dismissal is too swift, its details too peculiar to be mere invention. This enduring conflict makes the Oer-Linda book far more than just another potential forgery. It serves as a powerful, modern-day parable for the entire pursuit of ancient mysteries. It represents the profound human longing to hold proof in our hands, to have a concrete text that finally confirms our deepest suspicions about the past. That very desire, however, can sometimes cloud judgment, making us vulnerable to stories that feel true because we so desperately wish them to be. The lesson of the Oer-Linda book is not necessarily about its contents being false, but about the essential balance we must strive to maintain. It teaches us that the search for lost knowledge requires two wings to fly: open-minded curiosity and rigorous skeptical scrutiny. We must be willing to ask the thrilling question, what if this is real, while simultaneously demanding the evidence to support it? To ignore either side is to risk either dismissing a genuine mystery or being led astray by a compelling fiction. This balancing act between wonder and verification is the final and most crucial skill we must bring to the table as we prepare to look at the last text in our journey, one that brings us back to the very beginning of recorded thought, where the line between technology, magic, and the divine was not yet drawn. The debate over authenticity forces us to sharpen our gaze, to separate invention from inherited memory. Our final textual entry returns us to where this journey arguably began, to India, but through a different spiritual lens. We arrive at the Pali Canon, the foundational scriptures of Theravada Buddhism, preserving the oldest recorded teachings of the Buddha himself. Within these profound texts focused on mindfulness, compassion, and the end of suffering, we find a quiet but significant acceptance. The scriptures occasionally reference the Vimanas of the Devas, the gods. These are not machines of war or tools for human kings. In the Buddhist cosmology, they are described as luxurious celestial vehicles, the means by which deities travel between the various heavenly realms that exist within the cycle of rebirth. The tone is matter of fact. The existence of these flying palaces is simply part of the architecture of the universe, as natural to the Devas as a chariot might be to an earthly ruler. This normalization reaches a fascinating human level in one of the Jataka tales, the stories of the Buddha's past lives. In one account, a clever merchant, demonstrating exceptional skill, constructs a mechanical flying bird. This is not a gift from the gods or a stolen divine artifact. It is a product of human craftsmanship built to undertake a specific mission. While the description lacks the engineering details of the Vimana Shastras, its inclusion is profoundly telling. Here, in a philosophical system centered on inner transformation, the idea of human-made flight persists as a narrative device, a symbol of ingenuity within the vast tapestry of past lives. These Buddhist references complete a crucial circle. They show that the concept of aerial vehicles was not confined to the grand Hindu epics or to secret technical manuals. It was fully integrated, absorbed into the broader philosophical and religious imagination of ancient India. From the Vedic hymns to the Mahabharata, through the technical Sutradhara and into the peaceful teachings of the Buddha, the Vimana remained a constant feature. It was not a fringe idea or a controversial myth. It was an accepted component of reality, a feature of the universe's structure, as real and present in the minds of ancient thinkers as the mountains or the sea. This widespread cross-cultural integration across millennia is perhaps the most compelling argument of all. It suggests we are not looking at scattered fairy tales, but at the deep, bedrock memory of a human past where the sky was a place of journey, of conflict, and of connection. A memory so powerful it shaped humanity's vision of the cosmos, the divine, and our own latent potential for thousands of years. 25 texts from across the globe have now spoken. From the icy fjords of Scandinavia to the deserts of Australia, from the jungles of Central America to the plains of India, a chorus of voices separated by oceans and millennia, tells a disturbingly similar story. The sheer geographical and cultural isolation of these accounts makes their shared core impossible to dismiss as mere coincidence. We are not looking at stories that spread along trade routes. We are looking at a pattern etched into the bedrock of human memory itself. This convergence forces us to confront several possible explanations, each one a doorway into a radically different vision of our past. The first and perhaps most famous interpretation is the ancient astronaut theory. This view takes the texts at their word. It proposes that our ancestors were indeed describing real encounters with visitors from beyond our world. The Vimanas, the sky chariots, the celestial boats, and the fiery wheels were physical craft of advanced design. The gods and sky beings were extraterrestrial or interdimensional explorers, their technology so far beyond human understanding that it could only be interpreted as divine magic. Their conflicts, their teachings, and their departures became the seeds of our religions, our myths, and our sudden leaps in cultural development. This theory asks us to see these stories not as fantasy, but as fractured, awe-struck journalism. A second, equally profound possibility is the lost civilization hypothesis. This suggests the technology was human, but from a time we have forgotten. It posits the existence of a sophisticated, global culture in the deep past, perhaps before the end of the last ice age, which achieved a level of science and engineering that rivaled or surpassed our own. Their world met with a sudden, catastrophic end, drowned by rising seas or shattered by geological upheaval. The scattered survivors, reduced to a primitive state, carried only fading memories of that golden age. Over generations, the memory of their flying machines and powerful weapons transformed into the legends of gods and their celestial wars. Atlantis, Lemuria, or other sunken lands become not just philosophical allegories, but potential historical realities. Then there is the psychological interpretation, the idea of the psychocultural archetype. This view argues that flight and superweapons are universal human aspirations and fears, born from our innate curiosity and our capacity for conflict. We dream of soaring like birds and wield power like the thunder. In the absence of science, we project these deep-seated dreams onto our deities, creating stories where gods do what we wish we could do. The consistency of the narratives, then, reflects not a shared event, but the shared architecture of the human psyche. Our myths are mirrors, showing us our own hopes and terrors dressed in celestial clothing. Yet a fourth interpretation seeks a middle path, a synthesis of event and imagination. It suggests a global cataclysm, something witnessed by cultures everywhere. Imagine a near miss by a massive comet, its fragments lighting up the atmosphere with terrifying fireballs and thunderous sonic booms. Or consider the possibility of a massive solar plasma discharge, a celestial storm that painted the sky with auroras of unimaginable intensity, raining electrical phenomena to the ground. To prehistoric humanity, this would have looked exactly like a war in the heavens, a battle of luminous entities hurling bolts of fire. Each culture, trying to make sense of the trauma, would have framed the event within its own spiritual vocabulary, giving us the wars of the Mahabharata, the doomed flight of Phaethon, and the battles of the Norse gods at Ragnarok. Each of these explanations has its merits and its deep challenges, but perhaps the most important takeaway is not which one is correct, but the undeniable fact of the pattern itself. The consistency is the clue. Isolated cultures do not independently invent the same highly specific details: wheels within wheels, mercury engines, aerial battles causing radiation like sickness, and precise orbital knowledge of distant stars unless something inspired them. That inspiration, whether it was visitors, a lost chapter of human history, a cosmic disaster, or some combination thereof, must have been profound, global, and transformative. It shaped how humanity saw its place in the cosmos for thousands of years. The stories are the echo, our task is to listen carefully to what that echo is trying to tell us about the true scope of our journey on this planet. The library of the impossible now lies open before us, its pages whispering in a chorus of forgotten tongues. We have wandered its halls, from the precise Sanskrit of the Vimana Shastras to the vibrant ochre stories of the Wandjina, from Ezekiel's trembling vision by the river to the thunderous flight of Thor's chariot across the northern sky. 25 voices, separated by continents and millennia, have all sung variations of the same bewildering song. This collective testimony does more than simply intrigue us. It places a profound question mark over the entire conventional timeline of human progress. The standard narrative is a steady, upward slope from stone tools to silicon chips, but what these texts suggest are flashes, brilliant and fleeting, of knowledge or contact that do not fit neatly on that line. They hint at moments where the curve of understanding may have spiked dramatically, only to fall away into the fog of catastrophe or the slow erosion of time, leaving behind only the ghost of that knowledge, dressed in the robes of myth and legend. The value of this journey is not in forcing a single, definitive answer. It is in expanding the very framework of how we listen to our ancestors. Whether you interpret these accounts as literal history, as symbolic wisdom encoded in story, or as powerful psychological archetypes rising from the human mind, their existence undeniably deepens our respect for the ancient imagination. They were contemplating concepts of flight, energy, and cosmic conflict with a seriousness that demands our attention. They remind us that history is likely not a simple, linear path, but a vast, cyclical landscape with forgotten peaks and valleys whose traces linger only in story. As we close this particular volume, let that be the lingering thought. If even a small fragment of these echoing accounts preserves a kernel of truth about our past, then the human story is far more mysterious, more layered, and more magnificent than our textbooks have yet dared to convey. It means our journey as a species holds secrets we are only beginning to sense. What other echoes are waiting in neglected manuscripts, in half-understood inscriptions, or in the oldest stories told under the stars? The search is never truly over. We would love to hear which of these 25 texts resonated most deeply with you. Was it the technical detail of the Samaranga Sutradhara, the haunting vision of Ezekiel, or the celestial precision of the Dogon? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you crave more journeys to the edges of history's map, subscribe and join us for our next deep dive. Until then, keep questioning, keep wondering, and keep looking up. The greatest mysteries are often those written in the sky.